Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 13, Text number 12. Svarvitir Vatsarasyeshta Bharyasuta Sadatmajan Pushparnam Tigmaketam Cha Isham Urjam Vashum Jayam Svarvitir Vatsaras Yeshta Bharyasuta Sadatmajan Pushbarnam Tigmaketunja Isham Urjam Vashum Jayam Svarviti Vatsarasya of King Vatsara. Ishta, very dear. Bharya, wife. Asuta, gave birth to. Sat, 6. Atmajan, sons. Pushparnam, Pushparna. Tigmaketum, Tigmaketu. Cha, also. Isham, Isha. Urjam, Urja. Vashum, Vashu. Jayam, Jaya. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. King Vatsara had a very dear wife, whose name was Svarviti, and she gave birth to 6 sons, named Pushparna, Tigmaketu, Isha, Urja, Vasu, and Jaya. Purport. Vatsara's wife is mentioned here as Ishta, which means worshipable. In other words, it appears that Vatsara's wife had all good qualities. For example, she was always very faithful and obedient and affectionate to her husband. She had all good qualities for managing household affairs. If both the husband and wife are endowed with good qualities and live peacefully, then nice children take birth, and thus the whole family is happy and prosperous. So Srila Prabhupada's purport elaborates on this verse regarding the ideal situation for the grhastha ashram. In the present Kali Yuga, when there is so much intermingling between men and women, it is very difficult to be able to maintain the position of Naistic brahmachari. Generally, in India, when we speak of brahmachari, they speak about Naistic brahmachari. Although Prabhupada has certainly been liberal in all ways, including how he uses the word brahmachari. Just like sometimes we have our new bhaktas who have come out, swimming out of the material world after 72 affairs, each with a different woman, and then they come here and they are so-and-so das brahmachari. Certainly, it is a far cry from Sri Narad Muni or Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, who are real brahmacharis. So, the fact of the matter is that, as Prabhupada said, he said, "My Guru Maharaj came to make sannyasis. I have come to make grihastas." With that, he sent his grihasta disciples to London where 3 couples succeeded in doing what none of his godbrothers were able to do, although they were all sannyasis. So Prabhupada was very much proud and pleased to see how his grihastas were cooperating together, husband and wife, he used to say with double potency, to spread Krishna consciousness, how they were demonstrating that the position of a grihasta is no less capable of providing a very excellent platform for preaching Krishna consciousness. Of course, later on, Prabhupada had further thoughts about the matter, not so much in the sense that they were good for preaching, but he became a little bit disturbed to see that the grihastas did not remain faithful between husband and wife. And this was very disturbing to Srila Prabhupada. He became a little bit disillusioned with, not disillusioned, but disappointed with the fact that there was so much tendency for the husband or wife to give out each other's company and look for another husband or wife. Because practically this is very abominable in Vedic culture. It is never accepted. And there's always very severe consequences. When you read in Vedic literature, sometimes someone runs after another's wife. It creates havoc. If it's a demigod, it's like all of the heavens start to shake, and it's constant, big warfare going on. It requires practically, intervention of the highest powers that be to somehow cool the situation down. In other words, it's not at all appreciated activity. So, good household life is the basis for ideal society. Because we are all children of the householders, in a sense. The brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, the sannyasis are all being looked after by the grihastas. They're being maintained by the grihastas. So as the dependents of the grihastas, we are very much dependent that there be steadiness in the grihasta community. Otherwise, we find it very difficult to execute our religious duties. Therefore, it should be understood that one of the foremost, in fact, the foremost duty of the grihasta ashram is to give in charity. To give in charity, to maintain the persons belonging to the brahmachari, vanaprastha, and sannyas orders of life. Not that the grihasta should only be thinking of his own personal, immediate family. After all, we understand our family beyond this bloodline. Family is understood through the principle of connection with the spiritual master and Krishna. So our family is much greater than just one husband and wife and 2 or 3 kids. So a grihasta has to recognize that his success in Krishna consciousness has to be judged not simply by how far he is successful in maintaining his immediate blood family, but how far he can maintain the family of Krishna conscious devotees. Now, here are some helpful hints to the householders on how to become successful. First of all, the key is that the wife has to be possessed of all good qualities. And if she has these good qualities, she is stated here to be worshipable. So, that would seem to say that the husband becomes henpecked. But, not exactly, because henpecked is not the symptom. If your wife becomes like a hen and is always pecking on your head, then she's not worshipable. Here it states what a real good wife, what qualities she should possess. First of all, she should be very faithful to her husband. That means she has to be chaste. A wife should never look lustfully on another man besides upon her husband. And she has to take precaution, just like it is stated, that when the wife's husband goes away, then the wife should leave herself in a very unkempt condition. In other words, she should eliminate those jewelries or other things which make herself attractive, because she has no purpose to attract anyone besides her husband. Therefore, she has no reason to look very much attractive to anyone else. Of course, we have to accommodate everything. In other words, we don't expect that Yasoda Devi Dasi, when her husband goes out of town, looks like a mess when she goes to work. Otherwise, the business will fail. But the point being that one should only make themselves attractive for their husband and not with anyone else in mind. And actually that is one of the things which a wife must do. She's expected to always look her best, keep very clean, wear nice clean clothing, wear jewelries to a limited extent, and keep the house, we'll get to that next, very nice. In this way, she always attracts the mind of her husband. Now one may ask, why do we advise that the husband's mind become attracted by the wife? The reason is that if it is not attracted by one's wife, then it will become attracted by many other women. Now you may say, no, let it be attracted by Krishna. That we expect. In other words, we expect that the pujaris will outdo in their decoration of Krishna any of the women in the households. Not suggesting that but we are simply saying that in household life is a gradual step towards love of Krishna. So it takes for granted that already the man has got some other attraction besides Krishna, and he's feeling the need to gradually purify his senses. So the way he does that is through dealing with his bona fide wife, and not with many women. Therefore it is necessary for the woman to be attractive to her husband, so that she can keep his senses under control, simply under her control and not under the control of 15 other women. So she has to be very chaste. This is another feature which makes a husband love his wife. If the husband knows that the wife is never ever considering any other man, then immediately this woman becomes very endeared to him. So this is faithfulness. Next is obedience. Obedience means to follow the instructions. So yesterday we heard that a wife may not follow the instructions of her husband if her husband is not Krishna conscious. And the example is given of the wives of the Brahmins, the caste Brahmins, who are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam and in the Krishna book. You remember when Krishna and the cowherd boys and Balaram wanted to get some food to eat? And the caste Brahmins were too busy with their yajnik Brahmins. They were too busy doing yajna. But the women of the household thought that is complete nonsense, because the goal of all yajna is to satisfy Krishna and Balaram. And the supreme Krishna and Balaram are coming to our very door begging from us, and you're sending them away saying we're doing yajna. You have no idea what is the goal of yajna. So, we don't care what you do. You go on with your yajna. We are going to go and bring all of the preparations we cooked for this yajna. We're bringing to Krishna Balaram. Whatever, we don't care what you think. And so they left and went to join Krishna and Balaram. So here's an example of women who did not care for the instructions of their husband, because their husbands were not properly situated in Krishna consciousness. However, if one's husband is disciplined, that means if he's a bona fide disciple, then the wife's duty is to obey him in all regards. So, the qualification for being a bona fide disciple is to be strictly adhering to the instructions of the spiritual master. Therefore, the faithful, obedient wife does not have to worry, am I serving my husband, or am I serving my guru by serving my husband? If the spiritual master has been instructing a disciple, and the disciple is following carefully the spiritual master's directions, then if a wife is obedient to her husband, then automatically she's following the instructions of her guru. So a woman should have no doubt in this regard. Of course, she has the right to question. It's not that we want blind faith. Just as a disciple has the right to place relevant inquiries before the spiritual master, and naturally the wife has to do the same. Especially in so many practical affairs between husband and wife, there will be endless questions that have to be asked. It's not blind obedience, like a zombie. We're not asking for such a relationship, or we don't expect that there will be such a relationship. But the point is that the husband is meant to be the spiritual master of the household, of the, family. And therefore, the wife has to show her obedience to him. If she does this, then automatically the children will also be obedient to both her and to their father. In other words, this establishes the principle of authority in the home. You see, the home is the temple for a grhastha. It is a temple. So it basically establishes the ultimate authority of Krishna. When a wife is obedient to her husband, in essence, she's establishing the principle of Krishna's authority by her obedience to her husband. So she's teaching by her example all the other members of the family. It's like Lord Chaitanya taught how to be obedient, how to be a devotee. In this age, that is the best way you teach, by being a good example yourself. Here it says that she should be affectionate to her husband. Affectionate doesn't mean lusty or disturbing the husband's senses. Just like we have the terrible example of how Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksha were born, because the wife was overly affectionate, agitating, In other words, affectionate doesn't mean agitating. Affectionate means to be concerned with the needs of the husband. It doesn't, and that needs are to go back to Godhead. The real need of every man in this world is to be able to go back to Godhead. So the purpose of affection between a wife and a husband is so that the husband will feel inspired to go back to Godhead, not inspired for illicit sex. The word affectionate here doesn't mean that, I read in the Srimad Bhagavatam that we should be affectionate and therefore, disturb the husband again and again. Not like that. That's not the meaning here. So she has to know how to manage the household affairs expertly. That means every wife should be a very good cook, because one of the most difficult of all senses to control is the tongue. And if you can control the tongue, you can control all the other senses. So from 2 points of view. One, if the wife is a good cook, then she can be sure she can control her husband and keep him from thinking about premature sannyas or remarriage or just, woman hunting, because she can control all of his senses through his tongue. And 2, by giving him prasadam, he will control his senses for Krishna. It's not that when a wife does this, she's being selfish, because it's the religious duty of a woman to keep her husband satisfied so that for at least up to the age of 50, he is happy and peaceful, and then he can take sannyas. She has to manage all the affairs very nicely. That means she has to keep the house very clean, because the husband will come home and want to see that the house is nice and in order. She has to keep the children very clean and peaceful. The whole house has to be very peaceful. In this way, when the husband comes home, he thinks that I have worked very hard, but it was all worthwhile. And he can actually settle down and be very Krishna conscious in his home. So then the next duty of the wife, before we get to that, it says that by the husband and wife being endowed with all good qualities, they live peacefully, then nice children take their birth. When the husband and wife are peaceful, then the result is that they can execute religious duties, which means that they can chant nicely, Hare Krishna, and especially when they want to conceive children, they can actually think, yes, we're going to chant 50 rounds. Now, in regard to conceiving children, unless one gains the approval of the spiritual master, Prabhupada states one should not try to conceive a child, because the basic principle to be followed by every living being is always to take sanction for one's actions. No one should ever do anything that is not sanctioned, whether that person is the GBC devotee or whether that person is any devotee or whoever they may be. Everybody has to get their activities sanctioned. That is the concept that is followed within this world. We don't do things in an unauthorized way. So Prabhupada states clearly in his purports that the disciple should take the permission of the spiritual master. This is done even in Vedic culture. They would consult the learned authorities on what is the proper time and day. And we do more than that because we understand that devotees are not all so Krishna conscious, so we just got to know what time the auspicious day is. We have to know if they're responsible enough to have children. Previously, all they had to do was find out the proper day because everybody was Krishna conscious. So it was just a question of when is the most auspicious day. Now it's when is the most auspicious year. We have to understand. Therefore, it's not enough to consult an astrologer. Because an astrologer may not tell you whether you're Krishna conscious or not. They can just tell you what's the auspicious day. But an advanced devotee may not, be able to predict the auspicious date, the actual date. But at least he can tell you, yes, you're actually ready to have children and take responsibility, and it will be good for your spiritual life as well as theirs. So there should be this consultation. And there should be chanting 50 rounds. You have to make the time. You have to be able to do this. If you do, you get very saintly children. If you don't, well, okay, then you take the risk. Still, they may be devotees. Probably they will. But the better the meditation before conceiving a child, the better the results should be expected. So this way, the family becomes happy and prosperous. Something that we would always like to have here, prosperity. Now, the final duty of the wife, which is not mentioned here, but which I will add, is that she, through all of this, is supposed to cultivate detachment. So after all of these principles of attachment and care, actually she's supposed to be detached. Because she also has to realize that I'm not this body, and that all of these relationships which are presently going on are temporary. And at any time, my number can be called. And I may have to leave this world. And one day, if I live out my life in a normal course, and my husband does so also, he's going to take sannyas. So I have to become detached. I have to practically arrange in such a way that I become detached. Now, what is the meaning of detachment? The meaning of detachment is to become attached to something higher. So the highest of all things is Lord Sri Krishna. And when one becomes attached to Krishna, then that naturally follows that there will be detachment from all other things. So the wife has to spend sufficient time in doing service also for Lord Krishna. It's not enough only to do service for husband and children. There has to be time set aside every day for temple activities. Because you may say you're doing it for Krishna in your home. That's nice also. But since we all live in a close community, you can do service at the temple. This is clearly this is clearly for Krishna's credit. The work one does for the temple and the community. Whether it's cooking for the deities, whether it's working for Lord Chaitanya by preaching, going out on preaching programs, or book distribution, or working in the restaurant. These are activities which will increase your attachment to Krishna and ISKCON, and it will decrease your attachment to family affairs. And a wife has to be able to do that, because at a certain point, she has to also be able to turn her back on material affairs and completely take up full-time activities directly in the service of the Supreme Lord. She's doing so anyway, but very often in an indirect sense, which is also direct ultimately. But in an ultimate sense, all of these things are going to drop away. Everyone has to realize that sooner or later, there's just going to be myself, and my Guru, and Krishna. That comes at the end. There's nothing else but Guru and Krishna. So, this was a verse today that we discussed about in glorification of the ideal wife. Are there any questions? Yesterday we talked about ideal motherhood, right? Today was the ideal wife. Dr. Rupa. Yeah, that's not... Yes, I made the example of someone who had to go out to a job, but also, as you said, in deity worship as well. Yeah, and we don't want women looking like ghosts, like that woman we saw driving here back from the park. That woman looked like, some horror story. It's not that we want all the women to, put their hair in curlers and, do some crazy things and scare everybody away. Hang a big sign around your neck, my husband's out of town. out of order. No, at least within the mind, at least within the mind, one should turn off everything, Yeah, because the body is a manifestation of consciousness. The outward activities and appearances are manifestations of internal consciousness. It's not that, we are not following the process of avadutas, where we just let anything happen to our bodies, but internally, just like it mentions in the previous verse, here's a person. Utkal appeared to the less intelligent persons as on the road to be foolish, blind, dumb, deaf, mad, but actually he remained like fire covered with ashes, without blazing flames. That's like an avadut, but we're not, neither we are on the level of an avadut, nor are we advised by Prabhupada anywhere that members of ISKCON should become avaduts. Certainly not at this stage in our history. We don't want to have avaduts. So the external behavior of an individual should be very, very Krishna conscious as a symptom of his internal Krishna consciousness. Yeah, but as I say, in other words, that real heart is shown by practical action. That's my point. You can say what you're thinking. Definitely. It does. I agree with you. Yeah. That's very nice. Yeah, of course. Basically he's seeing your love, your bhakti. Krishna sees and tastes and feels the bhakti. But it manifests itself through practical actions. So he sees the action knowing that it's indicative of the bhakti. Well, practically, he can get letters from her, he can keep in correspondence with her, he can keep associated with those who are very renounced, so that he doesn't feel, in other words, not to associate too much with those who are very attached and entangled with family life, otherwise he'll become so full of lamentation that he won't be able to do his work properly. He'll become envious of their situation, and that may lead to further problems. So it would be best for such a person to keep associated with more renounced people so long as he has to be separated from his wife. At the same time, he should receive regular reports from her. And maybe he should increase his devotional activities so that he gets extra protection from Krishna. He can increase and chant a few extra rounds. He can read a half hour more a day. He can take on certain things because obviously if he's not with his family, he probably has a little extra time. So maybe he should see this as an opportunity to prepare myself to be more Krishna conscious so that when I return to my wife and children, I can be an even better husband and father for them. In this way, he'll still feel as if he's serving his wife and children, even though they're separated. Still, she has to keep up her household responsibilities. Duties which a wife may have in Krishna's service are not an excuse for being neglectful of her household affairs. If she's neglectful of her household affairs, there will be trouble in the household. She still has to maintain. She may discuss with her husband and work out an arrangement whereby they may both take some share of those household duties. But somehow or other the house must be very clean and orderly. The children must be well looked after. Whether they share it or whether she does it is not the issue. But it has to be taken care of. And if for some reason her husband is unwilling to, then she must do that. But there must be peacefulness in the household. And peace means not only in terms of relationships between husband and wife. That's very, very important. If the wife is obedient, then, it takes two to fight. It takes two to tangle. So if the wife is obedient, it can very much diminish the chance of arguments and quarrel, which are very disturbing to the children. as well as to the husband and wife. We don't want to see broken families. It's a big, big problem in the world today, broken families. Alright? Yes, Ram Shadavu. Correct. That's nice. If the central theme of any ashram is pleasure to the Guru and Krishna, then there will be success. That's the fact. Okay. Okay. Yes. Because the general public is not interested in when the woman is fertile or not. Because they basically are interested. In fact, if they were to make that knowledge available, there would be more sex life. The general public is interested in sense enjoyment, not in religious life. And I mean, actually they know that anyway. That's how the Roman Catholics are able to avoid pregnancy as much as they're able to. It's a common knowledge. It is common knowledge. Okay, I think we stop here. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga.